NATO is looking for ways to bolster support for Ukraine and strengthen its influence as Day 2 of the Military Alliances Summit gets underway in Washington, D.C. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization will also deepen ties with Indo-Pacific partners, Japan, South Korea, Australia and New Zealand, all of which have been invited as observers. NATO member Sweden has refloated the idea of opening an office in Tokyo. It is unclear whether that has any backing after a similar proposal was shot down by France just last year. President Emmanuel Macron had pushed back on that proposal, concerned that a representative office for NATO in Asia would anger China. Meanwhile, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer arrived in Washington for his first NATO summit since winning the UK election last week. Sir Starmer says he will fulfil Labour's commitment to increase defence spending to 2.5% of GDP, but only once a defence strategy review has taken place and when the country can afford to do so. In a welcoming speech to the NATO summit, US President Joe Biden promised to provide Ukraine with 5 new strategic air defense systems. Analysts say his forceful pledge to defend Ukraine against Russia was partly a bid to boost confidence in his ability to run for office again. This after his poor presidential showing in a debate against Donald Trump late last month.
But make no mistake, Ukraine can and will stop Putin. Especially with our full collective support. And they have our full support.
And for more on this, Nick Harper joins us live from Washington, D.C. Nick, the IP4, so this is Indo-Pacific 4 partners, Japan, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, joining as observers for the 3rd straight year running. What's the focus likely to be for this NATO summit when it comes to these Indo-Pacific partners?
Well, they very much want to be able to show that the Asia-Pacific region is inextricably linked to Europe. In the run-up to this summit, the US said that security in Europe hinges on security in the Indo-Pacific. They want to be able to show that strong alliance working in lockstep with Europe. And I think that's really trying to push back forcefully against China as a deterrent about what it might do in the future when it comes to the question of Taiwan. But I think we'll also see some concrete commitments coming from those 4 countries and its working relationship with NATO over the next few days. We'll see the big meeting between those 4 countries on Thursday. And out the back of that, we're likely to hear something of a commitment when it comes to cybersecurity and fighting disinformation in the Indo-Pacific region. On top of that, the US also says that they want those 4 partners to look at ways to build up defense industrial bases in the Indo-Pacific. We are unlikely to see any suggestion of membership to NATO for any of those 4 countries. You mentioned as well that idea of the satellite office in Tokyo. It has been suggested. We probably won't see concrete action on that as well, largely due to the disagreement and that concern about angering China. But I think also the fact that we have these 4 alliance partners attending for the 3rd time running is really there as a message to China that the world, the Asia-Pacific region, but also the Western alliance in Europe, is watching what China does. And there is that concern from the Western partners that China has been supplying weapons to Russia in its fight against Ukraine.
Of course, as you mentioned, inextricably linked. So President Zelensky from Ukraine expected as well to address the IP4 partners, so linking again security in the transatlantic region to what's happening in the Indo-Pacific. And with South Korea increasingly a big part of the defense industrial base, not just regionally, but globally as well, do we expect any plans or concrete proposals to arise from President Zelensky speaking to these 4 partner nations of NATO?
Yeah, very interesting this. He'll be speaking to them during that important meeting on Thursday, and he'll be pushing for more weapons, as he will be to all the countries throughout the whole of this summit. He wants more weapons from the West, but he's also looking to Asia, and he'll be making that appeal to them. Because in the last few weeks, we've heard from South Korea suggesting that they might be willing to provide arms to Ukraine. In particular, they were concerned about that security pact signed between Russia and North Korea. One thing that South Korea could potentially provide is ammunition in the form of artillery shells, something that Ukraine desperately needs. They get through about 200,000 shells every single month. We're told that South Korea could potentially have stockpiles in the region of 3 million artillery shells. So it could be that President Yoon plays a very outsized role in this alliance. Bear in mind, he's just attending as a partner nation, but the possibility of being able to provide those artillery shells to Ukraine is something that many countries will be looking to him to perhaps provide concrete answers on. It's unclear whether we'll get that, but we'll certainly hear more commitments from the Western nations. We've already had 5 air defence systems being committed by the NATO countries. We'll have shoulder-mounted Stinger missiles also being committed to the tune of about 700 million. So lots of weapons and lots of talk about how countries can provide them for Ukraine over the next 2 days.
And thanks to Nick Harper reporting live to us there from Washington, D.C.